Simon, what about the China-Australia relationship? Look, this was a step forward, and I guess it feels somewhat circular, doesn't it? Tensions rise, people are outspoken, a meeting is eventually held, and tensions ease somewhat. What did you make of Scott Morrison meeting the Chinese Premier over the weekend?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd always encourage, any Australian Prime Minister to meet with their Chinese counterparts and have constructive discussions with them. We don't always agree. I think, as we all know, whilst they are our most important trading partner, we don't always share values with them in quite the same way, clearly, we do with countries like the United States. I think a kind of a frank and robust discussion around those sorts of issues, but understanding that we do have a lot of common interest that we need to work on as well. I think part of the problem that the government had got to was, rather than having a sort of an upfront and honest conversation with the Chinese, is that unfortunately Scott Morrison was sort of yelling at them from the United States rather than looking him in the eye and having a conversation as friends should do. I think that's a far more constructive way for us to pursue our relationship with China, putting, as I said, the very obvious fact that around a number of value propositions we are going to disagree, and we should disagree around those.
Yeah, well, not just disagree, in some senses perhaps vehemently. It is fascinating, Kerry, to reflect now, more than 3 years since a meeting with the Chinese president. Such a huge part of our economy, and there's still an impasse there.
Yes, but I think the fact that the Prime Minister is meeting with the Chinese Premier and at that high level and having not just a passing conversation, but quite a long and lengthy period of time where they did, I assume, discuss all sorts of interesting things. And I agree with Simon, though. I mean, the reality is we are a world citizen. We are not just Australian citizens, and we need to play our part in this world. And there will be times when we will actually disagree with the way the Chinese government is operating. I think the Prime Minister said himself that, we are both very different democracies, and we will have disputes as to how those democracies will operate. But at the end of the day, we need to be in a position that we can have a, quote, full and frank discussion about the differences as much as we do about the things that bring us together. So I think it was an encouraging sign that they met at ASEAN, and I would hope that that would be the first of a whole lot of very high-level meetings between us and the Chinese government.
Just finally, and turning our attention to drought policy, which is, well, probably just about been finalised out of Cabinet now, but it's been a pretty rocky sort of period, Kerry. Yes, the government's been doing things within all of this, but we know as well the message hasn't always been a very unified one. The Nationals a bit grumbly about all of this. What have you made of the approach?
Well, I think the problem for the National Party is that there are people such as, Bob Katter and Pauline Hanson travelling around far North Queensland and North Queensland at the moment, talking to farmers and claiming that they can solve the problems of the drought. And they're saying that they can do it without spending money. And I think, the reality is that no one actually believes that's true. They are putting up ideas, they're asking the government to look at it. But when you're in that terrible position where you are actually trying to work out, can I keep my farm? Can I actually continue to live here? Can I have a living from it in the future? Listening to anybody who's got a solution is probably, understandable. The problem for a government, though, is that they actually have to have a complex, complicated and deliverable answer. And again, I note that the National Party have put up some ideas. National Farmers Federation have put up some ideas. What we need is a comprehensive policy, and the comprehensive policy both needs to address the short term, how do you keep people on farm, how do you actually give them money to live, but also longer term, which is what's been suggested by lots of governments over lots of years. So drought-proofing the country, I would hope, would be part of, or at least a plan to drought-proof the company would, I hope, be part of what we'll see out of Cabinet today or tomorrow.
Well, and this has been for years, people saying, let's have a genuine drought strategy, a longer-term one. It does seem to be something more on the government's radar, given the longer-term drought fund. Labor's approach on this, Simon Banks, I mean, it does feel a bit populist in a lot of areas. Yes, there have been the classic opposition, as I was saying, mentioning slip-ups from ministers and so on, but part of it seems to be saying, well, more. It's the Oliver approach.
Well, but we clearly did need to do more on drought. And I think, not only on drought, we saw it with the aged care report last week where the government was caught flat-footed. I guess one of the upsides for them of winning the election earlier this year is that they've had to deal with some of these more structural problems in important areas of policy like drought policy, aged care. And I think the real concern that Labor's been pointing to and is felt in the community is the government really hasn't had a long-term plan to deal with the fact that our droughts are likely to be deeper and have a bigger impact on parts of regional Australia. And aged care, you know, like anyone who'd been following the aged care debate would have known that there was some big funding problems in that sector. And again, the government doesn't seem to have thought through these in a structural way. And as a result, we've seen this kind of chaos within the government where it's been caught a bit flat-footed. Well, I just hope they come up with a good package tomorrow.
Yeah, well, I mean, home care packages is one where a lot of people frustrated at, yes, many more places there, but still such a shortfall. Simon Banks, Kerry Chikorovsky, thank you.